History can be horrible, and the beginning part of the 20th century certainly had some horrific moments, and would not have been the best time to be around. You would think that one world war would be the unluckiest situation to find yourself in, especially for an 18 to 20-year-old, as it would be a terror that would define the rest of your life. And surely if you survived that, then Lady Luck would be on your side. Well, think unfortunately again, as one of the unluckiest generations had to fight in not one, but two of them, and the time in between was not too pleasant either. With the centenary of the end of World War I just passing as I write this script, I thought about my Irish great-granddad, who was born in 1899 and ended up serving in the British Army during the Great War. He would survive only to die in his early 30s of a chest infection. But it got me thinking, if he had lived to old age, he would have lived through one of the most unluckiest periods in history, in my opinion. Let's imagine you're one of my great-granddad's generation, born in 1899 to a working-class family in, say, London, England. Turn of the century London was not the most pleasant of places to live, especially if you were poor, where 1 in 5 children die before their first birthday, and a working class person would earn about £1 a week. Also, if you survived the first year, you would have a 1 in 10 chance of not making it to adulthood. The survivors didn't have it much better, with some parts of London having 25 families sharing one toilet. But your long journey of bad luck is only at its start. Fast forward to 1914 and the outbreak of war in July. The great powers mobilise and you are just leaving school at the age of 15. Too young to join up yourself, but you see many people in your slums sign up and gradually leave for war. Now I say you would be too young to sign up, as during the war the legal age to serve abroad was 19. However, many soldiers saw active duty as young as 15. This was due to recruitment officers turning a blind eye to clearly underage recruits. Let's assume you come across an officer that plays by the rules and you're forced to wait until 1917 before you can enlist. Although in reality over 250,000 underage soldiers served in the British Army. After seeing out the closing years of the First World War and scarred with the sights, smells and sounds you would have encountered, you might be looking forward to returning home a hero. Well, possibly not, as between 1918 and 1919 a pandemic would hit the world, killing, depending on estimates, between 3 and 5% of the world's population. It would be known as the Spanish flu, and unlike other influenza outbreaks that mostly took aim at the weak and elderly, this time the victims would be young healthy adults. It would be the conditions of the soldiers' quarters during the end of the First World War that the flu would thrive in, and with millions of men demobilising and returning home, the deadly virus was spread quicker than any pandemic before it. The flu gained its name from the false impression of Spain seeing the highest mortality from the disease. It actually wasn't any better or worse than any other country, but the press in neutral Spain were allowed to report freely on the outbreak, whereas wartime censors for countries like France, Germany and the UK avoided reporting on the illness as to not affect their respective populations' morale. By December 1920, between 50 and 100 million people would be dead across the world. If you're lucky enough to survive so far and make it back home, life post-war was filled with apathy and disinterest in the experiences of ex-service personnel. With mental health conditions like PTSD going untreated, many men suffered in silence. During the war, many women filled the roles in many industries, and this led to a worker surplus in the post-war years. The surplus was further compounded by economic decline as wartime industries closed down, and national debt mounted up. Britain, however, was one of the better places to be in, with its programmes to retrain ex-servicemen in new skills. Many countries saw social and political upheaval, for example the Russian and Irish civil wars, and the toppling of the German and Ottoman empires. During the 1920s, you would see vast expansion and economic boom. It would be around this time that a war veteran such as yourself might get married and have children and start putting money into the bank and move out to one of London's new suburbs. The USA thrived in the 1920s, however you couldn't get a drink due to prohibition, and that would be a bit of a downer if you lived there. This period you could say were the golden years. However, towards the end of the decade, storm clouds started to appear over the horizon. On the 20th of September 1929, the London stock market crashed after Clarence was imprisoned for forgery and fraud. This would set off a chain of events in which weakened American investments in European markets. For several weeks, the Wall Street Stock Exchange would become unstable, with large amounts of stocks being sold gradually, intensifying during October. On Thursday the 24th of October, the market lost 11% of its value, marking the Wall Street Stock Exchange crash and the beginning of the Great Depression. Vast employment would hit the Western world, and the UK was no exception. By 1930, the jobless had more than doubled from an estimated 1 to 2.5 million, causing political crisis. Higher taxes and reduced unemployment benefits were proposed by an ever-increasing unpopular Labour government under Prime Minister James Ramsay MacDonald. To try and help the most needy, the government started the unemployment benefit system. However, to qualify, you needed to meet a strict means test. The test would involve a government official inspecting all of your assets and finances to see if you had any hidden earnings and savings. For many, it would be a humiliating experience and would spark several protests in the streets of London. Britain would lose the gold standard in 1931, which in turn would gradually help the country to recovery during the later part of the 1930s, stimulating another building boom in the south. However, some countries did not recover as quickly, and this led to a rise of National Socialism in Germany. Seen as a cure for the years of political and social upheaval, the Nazi Party would promise less unemployment and improve Germany's international standing. The storm cloud for war would start to loom again, as the militaristic Germany built up its armies and readied for European dominance. In 1939, you are age 40, and yet again the world powers would mobilise for war. France, Britain, Australia and New Zealand on the 3rd of September 1939 declare war on Germany after several provocative land grabs and the invasion of Poland.
Fight!
Unfortunately for you, the National Service Armed Forces Act of 1939 is enacted on the 3rd for all men aged 18 to 41, meaning you could be called for war once again, and to add salt to the wound, if you had a son, he could also be called if he was old enough. Even if you weren't called up, life wouldn't be easy, as you'd have to dodge the bombs falling nightly on London and all over the UK. The National Service Act stated if you were married, you would be called up after any single man. But eventually you would be called, as by the end of 1939, around 1.5 million had been conscripted into the armed forces. 1945 finally rolls in, and you've seen out another bloody world war. If you'd served in the armed forces, home time might be a while coming, as in the UK demobilisation was done on your age and how long you'd served. Even though you would be in your mid-40s, you wouldn't be the oldest serving, as later amendments to the Conscription Act in 1942 enrolled men as old as 51. In all, it took around 18 months to demobilise some 4.3 million British service personnel. Once home time had finally arrived, you would encounter a Britain still under rationing and a London in partial ruin. If that wasn't enough, many returning personnel received divorce papers, with 60,000 applications being processed in 1947. It would take years for Europe to recover from the Second World War, and another dark cloud would hold itself over life, known as the Cold War. In your retiring years of the 1950s and 1960s, you would see the nuclear age and the legitimate fear of total atomic annihilation, culminating in the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, do you think this is one of the most unluckiest generations, or would you be more unlucky to have been alive in another period in history? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it's a little bit different from the normal Plainly Difficult episode. If you liked it, leave me a thumbs up, and if you want to stay up to date on Plainly Difficult videos, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. I've got Patreon if you'd like to support the channel financially, and all that's left to say is thank you for watching.